What's up, everybody? Tim Anderson here, aka Renfield, the Bearded Dwarven Princess, and welcome back to another episode of Mondays in Middle Earth as we continue our read through of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion. I had this crazy thought in my mind when I started this 3 months ago that I was going to get through this before the Rings of Power launched. That's not going to happen. I initially started off doing multiple chapters per episode, and then I started getting deeper into the series, and as we got deeper into the series we started getting chapters that have a lot more going on, and so we've kind of gone to doing one chapter per episode, and we're still not through the first half of the Two Towers. So it's going to be however long it's going to be. It's probably going to be the rest of this year at the very least. We'll see. Today we're going to be doing chapter 9, Flotsam and Jetsam, um, which is chapter 9 of the Two Towers, as we're continuing our read through of the Two Towers. And dun, dun, dun. And I'm pulling a couple of things up real quick before we get going. If this is your first time tuning in, don't forget to check out previous entries in the series. I'll put it up there for you to look at. We do these every Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time, so if you can follow along at your leisure. We've done previous episodes throughout since we started a few months ago. Started off with The Hobbit, and then we got into Fellowship of the Ring, and now we're into the Two Towers. And we are doing the Return of the King and the Silmarillion. I've had some people request that I do like the history of Middle Earth and stuff. Maybe I'll do that on a continued basis in 2023 as long as these continue to gain traction. So if you want me to go beyond the initial plans, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you get updates like this in the future and show me that you have enough interest in this series to have me continue it beyond the initial read through. Don't forget there's also a dedicated section in our Discord server for this series. You can find the links down there where you can discuss at greater detail if you would like, or drop comments here on YouTube. So without further ado, we're going to get into Flotsam and Jetsam. Now, when I first read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I was 7 years old. I read The Hobbit when I was 5, and then I got into the Narnia books, and then I read the Lord of the Rings books. Now, there's a lot of language in here I didn't understand, but I'll never forget, like, this has stuck with me over the years. The name of this title, I did not know what the words flotsam and jetsam meant as a 7-year-old kid, and I had to go get a dictionary and look it up. So, flotsam is the wreckage of a ship or its cargo found floating around on or washed up by the sea, or people or things that have been rejected and are regarded as worthless. Um, and jetsam is unwanted material or goods that have been thrown overboard from a ship and washed ashore, especially material that has been discarded to lighten the vessel. Now, in this case, this entire description is about all of the goods that are floating around in the waters of Isengard after the Ents um, do what they do in this chapter. But I didn't know what those words meant when I was a kid, and so this is the one thing that has stuck with me all throughout the years is that I had to go get a dictionary in our house and go look these words up because it was the meaning was something I completely didn't understand, and I was like, what are these words? Big words for a 7-year old. And it's been the one thing that's stuck with me all over the years. Um, we start this chapter off with this really happy reunion. Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas remain behind with the hobbits, while Gandalf and the king go off to meet with Treebeard. Um, and it's kind of funny because the way they talk about it here is it's like uh, the Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas are talking to the hobbits and saying, the important people are going off to discuss kingly things. Now let's get caught up with you and tell us all about your adventures. And by the way, why don't we share some of that food and pipeweed in particular? Because Gimli in particular in this chapter, he's just all sorts of Twitter pated and kind of like, yeah. They did a really good job with this in the films when Gimli's like salted pork, and like, they find them sitting here and it's a really good it's a really good visual representation of this chapter in the films. But this is a really 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 good chapter. Um, but yeah, it's all about the food and the pipeweed at this point, and basically Merry and Pippin getting Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas up to speed with things, and lots of talk about Longbottom Leaf and the hornblower branding on the barrels. It's important for later. Um, so in essence, this chapter is just a lot. At least the majority of this chapter is mostly dialogue at this point, as Merry and Pippin recount everything that happened from the time of them being captured, leading up to the present when they're meeting everybody here in Isengard. So we get the retelling of the storming of Isengard by Treebeard and the others, and the Ents destroying Isengard, or at the very least laying siege to it and wrecking all of the smithies and the engineering and everything else that Saruman had built up and put towards war. And in essence, pretty much destroyed everything other than the tower and washed it all clean. What's really interesting here is that as they're describing things, Merry, during the retelling, suggests that Saruman seemed to lack courage alone in a tight place without a lot of slaves and machines and things, and he wonders if perhaps his fame was not all along mainly due to cleverness in settling at Isengard and choosing that as his location. And Aragorn replies to this and says, "No, no, 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 don't be fooled. He was once as great as his fame makes him out to be, and even now in defeat, only a few, perhaps Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, along with a handful of others, would be safe left alone to talk with him." This is very important because the you know the hobbits just witnessed Treebeard and the Ents come down and just wipe Isengard off the map, and they saw Saruman reduced to a scared old man hiding in a tower, including the sequence where Quickbeam sees Saruman trying to run back to the tower because he had been at the gates as his armies went forth, and then the Ents came in and laid waste to everything. And Quickbeam sees him trying to get back to the tower, and he shouts out, "The Tree Killer! The Tree Killer!" and chases Saruman down and almost gets him before Saruman makes it back to Orthanc and locks himself in the tower. And because of this, because the hobbits see him in retreat and they see him in a state of lesser power, they're like, oh, maybe he's not as powerful as everyone makes him out to be. And this is when Aragorn is like, no, 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 don't be fooled. Even in defeat, this guy is a badass, and no one is safe left alone with him. I really like it here where Pippin describes the moment that Gandalf arrives, and he just sees him coming up in the night on a horse, and sees his figure with glimmers of white, and then he realizes who it is, and he's like, Gandalf, and and Gandalf, he says, "I stood up staring with my mouth open. 'Gandalf,' I said at last, but my voice was only a whisper. And did he say, 'Hello, Pippin? What a pleasant surprise!' No, indeed, he said, 'Get up, you tomfool of a took. Where in the name of wonder and all this ruin is Treebeard? I want to speak with him quickly.'" It's just, you get this scene of Pippin be like, "Gandalf," and Gandalf doesn't say hi, or he's like, "Where's Treebeard, you tomfool of a took?" And yeah, it's all about the flooding of Isengard here, when they take the Isen down and reroute the water and cleanse all of Isengard. Um, and this is when it talks about when Grima shows up, when Wormtongue shows up, and Treebeard grabs him off of his horse, and Wormtongue is giving this whole speech, and Pippin's retelling this to Aragorn. He's like, "I heard what he was saying, and my first instinct was, what a liar! You can't trust a word that's coming out of this man's mouth." But Treebeard lets him speak, and then when he finally finishes, he's holding him up, off of his horse, and he says, "Too bad for you. Gandalf got here first, so I know as much about you as I need, and I know what to do with you. Put all the rats in one trap," Gandalf said, "and I will do so." And then he basically offers Wormtongue a choice at this point. He says, "You can either wait for Gandalf to return, and you can wait right here with me, or you can go to the tower with your master." And he chooses to go to the tower with Saruman and flounders off through the Flotsam and Jetsam, as it were. And Treebeard is chuckling, taking great mirth in watching the rat scurrying away through the dirty water. It's quite good. As we get to the end of this chapter, we get a retelling of everything, and there's this moment where they're talking about the pipeweed again, And Aragorn understands everything about the tale except for one thing. He says, "How does Leaf from the South Farthing come to be in Isengard?" And of course, those of us who have read the books before, if you have never read the books, this is the point where I say spoiler alert. Because if you've never read the books, the movies don't have the same ending. At the end of all of this, we of course make our way back to the Shire, and we find some things out that had happened, dealing with Saruman and Wormtongue, and the fact that they had been involved in the Shire for quite some time, largely because Saruman had suspected that something was going on because Gandalf was always there, so he himself started to put his claws in there. But this is a foreshadowing, of course, because we don't really come back to this until we get to the end of all the books. We get to the end of Return of the King, and we've thrown the ring into the Mount Doom, and we're on our way back to the Shire, and that's when we circle back around to this foretelling moment here. At the end of this chapter, when Aragorn is saying, I just don't understand how Leaf from South Farthing could be here. What could that be? Well, knowing what we know about the end makes total sense. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, that's this week's chapter read through. I'm not going to do two chapters this week because we're already at 11 minutes in, and I don't want I don't want these to be 20-minute episodes. I like to keep them rather short so we can go through one a week and have fun reading. But I have already read the next chapter, so we're going to be moving on to that next week. And I only have one more chapter left to read, which I'm going to be reading this following week, which is the Palantir chapter, and that's the end of book 3. So uh, we'll see where we get through the month of August, because by the end of the August we should be on to the Frodo and Sam part of the journey and book 4 of the Lord of the Rings. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, new episodes are out every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Drop your comments below, like, subscribe, hit all the bell icons, do your thing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Happy reading, everyone.